Andy Elliott says he built the largest sales training company in the world, doing more than 160 million a year. But half the internet still thinks he is a complete fraud. They say he just yells motivational garbage, flexes on camera, and runs hype rallies instead of real sales training. But the other half claim he's one of the best salesmen in the world. So which one is it? Well, as someone who closes more than 10 million in sales a year, I've decided to find out for myself. And that's why in this video we'll break down his sales strategies and tactics to see how well he goes against what's working today.
By the way, I said I was gonna give you 5 secrets. I actually did 7. At the end, I'm gonna give you probably my 2 favorite at the end. You guys ready? My winners, listen up. Objections are gifts. They're not bad. Most salespeople, when they get a no, they're like, oh man, this sucks. It's like, dude, objections show you what to address. They're great. Let's say I sell fitness, and the guy says, Andy, I need to talk to my wife. Hey, no problem. Look, let me ask you a question. Does she know that you're struggling with this problem right now? Like the fact that, you felt overweight for a while, does she know that you're struggling with this? Well, yeah, she knows. Okay, cool. So you think she would be upset if you actually acted on it and fixed it so that you could be happier? And I'm sure the more you loved you, the more you could love her and the kids and the family. Like you're saying you need to talk to your wife. I don't think you need to talk to her. I think she's gonna ask you, are you serious this time about doing it or not?
Okay, let's pause. I disagree that objections are gifts because you can actually pre-handle objections so you don't have to deal with the headaches of objections at the end of the call. Yes, objections are ways in getting the sale, but you don't have to deal with objections every single time if you know how to pre-handle them. Now, Andy doesn't do a horrible job handling this objection until he stopped asking questions and went into preaching mode. You don't need to tell the prospect, well, your wife is gonna say this and this and this, because that's assuming, and assumptions kill sales. He could have just shut up at the point where he asks the prospect, would your wife be upset if you did this? You can shut up and listen to what the prospect is saying.
So why don't we rephrase the question? Let's ask you, are you going to do the work? Because if you do the work, the blueprint gets you the results you want. I think that if your wife knew that you were struggling with something, she would want you to overcome it because she'd want you to be happy, right? Don't you agree? You'd probably want the same for her. If she was struggling with weight for 2 years, and she decided to make a decision to lose weight, and she asked you, honey, is it okay? What would you say to her? No, I want you to stay overweight. No, you'd say, of course, babe.
At this stage, we're just steamrolling the prospect, and this is where I don't love how he pushes the prospect, because again, he's trying to use his wife logic against his logic for giving a partner objection, and that's just forcing the prospect into what we call a logic trap, a situation where they can't really say no. They have to say, yes, I agree with you, but it creates hidden resentment in the prospect's brain because you're giving them no way out. So when people feel closed off and without options, do they really play along or do they push back? And they will typically push back because they feel that they don't have the control in the situation. You're just forcing them to say something you want them to say.
This is big. Assume everything. Assume everybody's gonna buy. I ask people all the time, how do you want your new car titled? Hey, by the way, what email address would you like to get the training started with? Close without asking for permission. Don't ask for permission. You earn the right to ask for the sell. If you've done your job, if you've created enough value, if you've made a great connection, if you've asked the right questions, you've earned the right, assume the sell. Number 5.
This is horrible. Never assume the sale. This is advice from the 80s. And it didn't work back then, it doesn't work today. When you assume the sale and someone closes and you get the sale from that, you close the sale despite you use that horrible technique, not because you used it. And why that doesn't work? It's because you're shoehorning again the prospect into a situation where they have to say yes. Like, which card would you like to put this on? Well, I don't want to put it on any card because I'm not sure I want to do this yet. So you're not only getting into a situation where you're forcing the prospect to tell you directly no, you also erode the trust you built throughout the call because you're using strategies like that. What Andy is missing out on here is you don't need hard permission from the prospect. This isn't about, oh, I don't want to give the prospect any permissions. I have to assume the sale. Or on the other hand, it's, oh, I need to ask permission to get the sale. It's not about all that stuff. If you do Your job throughout the call, like you said, you build trust, you ask the right questions, you create value by asking the right questions, which creates doubt in the prospect's mind. We naturally can lead into a scenario when they say, yes, I'm ready to move forward. You don't need to use bullshit strategies like that and sabotage your own sale.
Let me explain it to you. Stack small agreements to lead to the big yes. Stack small, little baby agreements. Stack them to lead to the big yes. Get them used to saying yes, right? If you go into a real estate company, what do they have you sign? The first 10 pieces of paper are a bunch of easy stuff. They have nothing to do with money, nothing to do with interest rate, nothing to do with the loan, nothing to scare you off. They're just a bunch of little silly stuff. And that way they get you used to signing, and then after that, the next 100 pages, you're not even reading no more. You're just signing. That's how they do it. Guys,
that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? It's as if you're going to McDonald's and the salesperson there, the cashier, asks you, okay, do you want a Big Mac? Yes. Okay, do you want a milkshake? Yes. Do you want fries? Yes. Will you give me your home? No. There's no scenario where creating a yes train and getting someone to say yes, 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 yes is going to increase the chances of them actually buying. What Andy is trying to do here is tell you that one micro commitment can lead to a bigger commitment, which is true. But when you force the prospect to tell you yes with bullshit questions, that's not commitment. That's just the prospect nudging you on because they want to be done with this stupid sales process. They're not committing to anything. So we're not using the psychological bias of this is a micro commitment that will lead to a bigger commitment. That's just how we do a downsell, and then we do an upsell. Micro commitment leads to a bigger commitment. This is a scenario where, oh, you got my signature on paper number 1, so now I can write you my entire fortune just because you got me to sign 10 papers ahead of it. That's not how it works.
Okay, hey Mike, what's going on, buddy? It's Andy Elliott down here at ABC Motors.
Don't call your prospects buddy, please. It's just unprofessional, it's stupid, and it's you playing the status game. Now you're trying to sell them something, you try to earn their respect and trust, and you call someone buddy.
Where you bought your 2019 GMC Yukon from. Hey, really quick, do you got 30 seconds? You always gotta say, do you got 30 seconds? Can I get 30 seconds? Because they'll always say yes. If you try to talk to them, but you don't put a time frame on it, they're gonna disconnect. But if I say, do you got 30 seconds? They'll always say, yeah, I got 30 seconds.
They will never say, I have 30 seconds. It's always best to go negative and say something like, I'm sure this is a bad time to talk right now, right? And typically people will say, no, it's not the worst time. What do you got for me? That's reverse psychology. If you ask for people's time without telling them what do you want their time for, why would they give you their time? Especially when they know you're about to sell them something.
And they won't say, yeah, I got 30 seconds. They'll just say yes. Okay, cool. Hey, Mike, I'll make this quick. Do you still have the 2019 GMC Yukon that you bought from us back then? Do you still have it? And by the way, it sounds intriguing because they don't know if I'm calling like there's a warranty problem. They don't know if there's a recall problem. They don't know anything. I didn't tell them I was from the sales department. I just told them I was from the place they bought their last car. I named the car they bought because I know what it says in the computer. So when I say that, they're like, oh, this guy knows something about me. And then I say, do you got 30 seconds? And they're like, sure, I got 30 seconds. And then I'm like, awesome. Hey, by the way, do you still have that 2019 GMC Yukon? Do you still have it? At that point, they would either say yes or no. Most of them, because I would call within 3 years, would say yes. That's my second yes. If they'd
in this scenario, since you already have a point of resonance, like you know what their car is, and you're calling them from a place that they bought this car, you don't even need to ask permission for their time. You can pretty much say, hey, this is Chris calling in from Audi. Do you still have this A3 that you bought 3 years ago? That's a single point of resonance that they will say yes. Because again, they will be concerned. They will be like, oh, is this a warranty issue? Do they want to upsell me? What are they trying to do?
We'll just say, oh, okay, cool. Hey, by the way, what do you have? What did you replace it with? What vehicle do you have now? And I would just pivot over there. It wasn't the conversation was over. I just pivoted. This is where the money's made. You say this, it's quick. You say this is quick, and you say this is quick. Awesome. My general manager asked me, I want you to write this down, to personally reach out and ask you one question. If we could offer you more money, you got to say it twice. If we could offer you more money than what your car was worth, because he's got a neighbor looking for a vehicle like yours, I can maybe tell a little story, or I could just go straight into it.
Don't tell little stories like that. You're straight up lying to people. Also, the whole script of my general manager asked me to personally call you. This is an old Grant Cardone script. It doesn't work. People know that you didn't cherry pick them, and the general manager told you specifically to call them. People are smart enough to know that you're calling a list for a specific reason, so just tell them a reason. Be upfront about it. You don't need to say, oh, I have a neighbor who might be interested in your car. Like, make the offer that you want to make, and we can reward it as we go on.
Hey, listen, on the 2019 GMC Yukon, you guys still have it? My general manager, he wanted me to personally reach out, call you myself, and ask you one question, just one. If he could offer you more money, and I would always say it like that, more money, I'd say it twice, than what your car was worth, I would say, would you mind if we told you how much that was? Can I tell you? And they would always say, yes.
I like the question that says, would you mind if I told you? Because it's a no-framed question. This is something that he does well here. Would you mind if I told you? No, I wouldn't mind. Please tell me. Like, I love that question because it's a no-framed question that leads the prospect to say no, which opens the door to us.
Okay, when people are around you, is it infectious? Smiling while you're speaking creates energy, and it lets people be at peace when they're with you. However,
smiling while you're speaking makes people cringe when you're selling to them, because you know that you didn't get them excited. They're not smiling for nothing. They're smiling because they try to get something out of you.
However, looking annoyed and having no interest is what most people do when they speak and they don't smile. So anytime you're speaking, and by the way, anything that's a skill you can learn, always remember that. If someone can do something, people will say, oh, that guy's different than that guy. No. That person has a skill that that person doesn't have. But if that person can do it, that person can do it too, because anything that's a skill that someone else can do, you can learn. Just never freaking forget that, okay? The greatest salespeople are made, not born. Dude, people say, oh, that guy's got the gift of gab. He's been great at sales his whole life. I promise you, people that have the gift of gab, most of the time talk too much, don't hear, and they're not actually very good salespeople.
I agree, but this is Andy. He's describing himself. Like, he has a gift of the gab, he yaps a lot, he doesn't ask the right questions, he doesn't get a lot of sales. I'm sure he is great at communication, I'm sure he's great at marketing, his brand shows us that. But when it comes to sales, this is all, 90% of what I hear is outdated advice from the 80s.
Salespeople are made. These micro skills are gonna make you dangerous. So, number one, smiling with your eyes. Number two, smiling while you speak. Number three, eye contact. This is huge. If you're talking to me and I see that, like, you look down at your phone, I believe that you believe that your phone is more important than our conversation. I'm looking at your eyes. And by the way, when you don't look at people in the eyes, there's this thing they used to do in the old school days called the ironclad handshake, when I'd reach out and shake your hand and look at you in the eyes. People still live by that code.
I don't disagree. Look people in the eye, shake their hand, and move on. Don't make it too weird.
All right, here we go. Number four. Humor and laughing. This is so freaking important, dude. People get stressed out when they spend money. People, when they get serious, they freeze, they get paralyzed. You gotta make it fun. That's your job. Listen, if people could just click on the internet and buy it and they didn't need you, you would never get paid a commission. So when someone's in front of you, right, don't make it freaking frustrating on them. Don't make a stressful decision. Things are expensive. Would you guys all agree right now? Inflation is real and things are costing more money? Abso-freaking-lutely. So whenever things are costing more money, monthly payments are higher, price tags are bigger, I gotta spend more cash.
Humor is 100% acceptable, and I encourage and use humor in my sales process. However, I don't laugh while I'm doing humor. That makes it corny. If I'm trying to be playful and a little bit humorous with someone, I'm not gonna laugh at myself or by myself. I'm gonna try to be humorous to disarm the tension and any sales resistance that they have towards me. I'm not gonna start laughing randomly, because again, that shows the prospect that I'm using it as a tactic and not because I'm being genuine with them.
Every time I learn, I earn more money. I'm obsessed with learning. I'm freaking obsessed, I'm ate up with it. All right, hands. Dude, these things right here are the most dangerous things in the freaking world. Keep them out of your damn pockets. Keep them here, right? So I put over here, no energy. Look, these things paint pictures, they tell stories, they sell ideas, they sell situations, they influence, they persuade. These are magic wands. Don't you ever put them in your freaking pocket. Don't you ever cross them. Don't you ever put them behind your back. Keep them here. And those of you right now that are earning a lot of money, you know that these hands, these are your superpower, your magic weapons. These create energy. I can calm the room and I can bring it up.
100% agreed. Like, our hands should always be visible, regardless if we're selling in person or in Zoom. When we show our prospects our hands, like when they can literally see our hands, they don't see us as a threat. If I hide my hands from this desk, subconsciously you don't know what I'm doing with them. Like, is he hiding a weapon? Even if through a camera I can't really hurt you, your mind is telling you, what is he doing with his hands? Like, what game is he trying to play? But when you see my hands and I can direct your attention accordingly, there's a lot of power in that. So is Andy Elliott good at sales? He has 3 things that he excels at that outnumber and outpower every single bad technique that he has. And that's certainty, conviction, and confidence. And these are very important when it comes to our sales game. However, Andy has been in this game for 20 plus years, and when he sells salespeople, that he can literally tell them that, hey, I've made more money than you, you should trust me. I'm not gonna say that his job is much easier, but he can bring this level of conviction. But when it comes to transferring these skills to other salespeople, I would easily give him a 3 out of 10, because all of his techniques are outdated. Typically, it's rehashed material from Grant Cardone back in the 90s, and 90% of them, I would say, are damaging to a sales conversation. What I would take away from him is the way that he shows up for his brand, his confidence, his certainty, and how he is able to charm people into buying, not his actual language, techniques, and tactics. Now, if you want to see the best and the worst sales gurus of 2025, watch this video right here, and I'll see you there.